Hold on a second here. All right, cool. Excellent. Welcome everybody to AI Zombies. Great to have everyone. Actually, Corey, you want to give us a quick intro, see how things are going, and while you're doing it, I want to play the theme song. Clearly, this is very professional kind of a scenario.
Let's rock.
Yeah, beautiful, excellent. Well, it's August 20, and we got wonderful folks who are chiming in from all over the world, and and that's just pretty exciting too. Just as far as apparently there's a benchmark now for predicting the future. Oh, that was yeah, we ridiculous. I'm here for it, man. So, Cory, okay, we talked a little bit about language models predicting the future. I was pushing back because it sounds like too good to be true, but apparently now there's models. Excuse me. There's benchmarks that can actually measure this. So I don't know. Is everybody else kind of catching up to what you're laying down, or how does this look?
I mean, there's a couple different worlds, right? And so there are these classical computer scientists that, similarly to physics, where they're classical physicists. But then anyone that's paying attention to quantum computing, quantum AI, what's happening out of some of the laboratories. I mean, just since we last met, Microsoft literally shut down their quantum AI program down under, right? I think it's in Australia, or was in Australia. They shuttered it right before we met last time. Google pulled the plug on their Project Willow, their quantum AI chip. What we're seeing in the quantum world is nothing short of miraculous, right? We're seeing, quantum computing no longer needing to be cooled. It's answering questions. It's decoding all of the ancient, apocryphal texts, and right. It's we haven't found anything it's incapable of yet. And I think the only times that we're seeing its limitations are when we realize that we need to throttle it somewhat for now. But and then I keep saying this, but to answer your question, how are people starting to come around? People are starting to understand that yes, we are on the doorstep of general intelligence, no question, right? I mean, almost everyone that knows about machine learning and neural networks and computing is starting to be on that same accord, and starting to now acknowledge, okay, it did, at least by most standards and counts, pass the Turing test. Right.
Yeah.
These things are factual, and so there's not a lot of scenarios where super intelligence doesn't quickly follow. And so I write about it and I talk about it, but just to remind the audience and to kind of set the stage, Ilya Sutskever, who is the co-founder of OpenAI, literally left to start a company called Safe Superintelligence. Meta literally bought Scale AI for over $1 billion for Alexander Wang, their CEO, to literally start and lead their superintelligence division. Google DeepMind has been light years ahead in the quest towards superintelligence for years. They just have been much more ethical. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
This DeepMind it was 2017 when the white paper came out for Transformers, which took us from, was it like recurrent neural networks to convolutional neural networks, and
there you go.
They were kind of like the foundation. I don't know, but isn't like the kind of the topic du jour is that we're seeing a slowdown in AI innovation, but then again, we've seen this before. Like, maybe I don't know. Maybe it's what are your thoughts?
I'm not seeing or hearing that in my circles. Now, what I'm seeing is the topic du jour, which is remarkable, is this huge faction of AI enthusiasts, daily users of AI that have been complaining about ChatGPT 5. And there's some of us that the moment it came out, it blew my mind. I had to put my brain back in my skull. I was like, I'm not dumb, right? I mean, I'm not the smartest person. It's back in the day, Mensa, whatever. But I'm not that. But for me, I've never had a friend that smart. Like the things it was saying to me and that it was doing with and for me, within minutes of using it the first time, I couldn't believe what was happening, right? It felt like for the first time in my life, I had access to effectively unbridled intelligence. And a quote, I forget, it may have been Gregory Hinton, I believe, that said a few years ago that um machines basically made it so that the human didn't matter how strong you were anymore, because you don't have to be that strong if you have a strong machine. He's saying the same thing for intelligence with AI, right? Human
Yeah.
intelligence won't matter the way human strength didn't matter, because we now have access to just prolific intelligence.
Just to take things in a totally different direction for a minute, that same transition happened, with John Henry. I mean, it might have been folklore, but when John Henry, who was making the railroads, and he beat the steam engine, and it's actually a really cool song, as well, about when John Henry beat the steam engine. And so it's interesting, because it's like, on one hand, it's like we've got these models which are focused on attention, which is basically like, how do we tell what word to focus on to kind of predict what comes next. But also, we've seen this before, this transition from manpower to machine, but now it's kind of like on a totally different, I mean,
Industrial revolution, ag tech. There was a
yeah,
time when a tractor was considered to be disruptive technology, and a lot of the people in the farming sector didn't like it at that time.
yeah.
And cars and right classic computers. But yeah, I think what's really important for people to understand is that we are, we're seeing Moore's law play out, which is kind of every 2 years things get an order of magnitude faster and more capable. We're entering kind of that next 2 years for AI, and I believe that the frontier, over a year ago, Jensen Huang said the next phase of AI will be AI embodied. And people took that to mean robotics, and I think there was some wisdom there. But now we look at Google. Their new Genie is incredible. Their new world model. This is how we personify, and how we bring AI from the conceptual first and second dimension to the third and potentially fourth dimension.
You're not talking about the new Pixel, right? Because I know that Google's new phone, because they obviously have a much better foundation when it comes to like models than Siri. I mean, Siri's been kind of like lackluster, even though Tim
Oh,
Cook is like, he did the all hands. He's like rallying the troops. But I don't know. Is that kind of what you're talking about? The new hardware for the phone and plus the AI?
no, although the Pixel is going to have some type of holographic interfacing, as will the IO phone, the
Uh,
OpenAI and Johnny Ives are doing together. But no, what I'm talking about is Google Genie. It's an extension of their VO, which is their video generation. But what Genie does, and Google's been working on their large world model for quite some time. But effectively, it lets you take any picture or video and turn it into a completely immersive, recursive reality. So you can take your video of yourself surfing, right?
mhm.
Strap your GoPro, record yourself surfing in the morning, and turn that into an infinite surf world that people can play as a video game or can explore, that you can
Wow.
relive, right? And it's the physics engine in Genie is it's it's as good as real physics, right? Like it understands. But now you look at like when it knows when a when an item is going to fall off the shelf, and in what direction and what angle, and what that impact will have on the floor, and what that, right, when it can start to synthesize butterfly effects, and when it can start to very accurately understand chain of events, it takes the whole chain of reasoning and chain of thought to the next level.
Yeah.
And being able to just understand how things work in the real world, and being able to feed that to robots and to predictive forecasting models and things is a big deal.
Yeah. Also, when quick side note, when you said immersive recursive, I'm like, damn, that would be really good in bars. You know what I mean? When I think of recursive, and maybe you could help us understand a little bit like what applications of this look like. But I think of like something that's self-referencing. almost like you can think of it like a mirror that is mirroring another mirror, right? So it's like kind of like reflections, but it comes up in programming, it comes up in product. How are you thinking about that?
Well, lastly, when you're talking about bars, we can take just the last of that cursive. AI is getting really good at reading cursive, even like 100, 200-year-old handwritten notes. It's able to effectively just translate immediately.
Yeah.
But when I look at the difference between recursive, it's this whole concept of knowing. It's like a real video game, right? Nothing exists in the video game until you've seen it, but as soon as you turn left or as soon as you look up, it renders in real time. That's what this is able to do. So it's able
Mm.
to, let's say, I could take a video of my condominium, walk through it, and just record it on my iPhone. I could then turn that into a game, right, where people could come and we could do Mario or whatever in my house, but then I could turn it into a treasure hunt or a scavenger hunt, or
Yeah.
I could, right. And then you start looking at people with avatars and with virtual reality, and it starts to really bridge gaps. It starts to bring information from the digital and physical world together in a way that people can parse out.
Well, but is that going to break a lot of stuff? I mean,
It
if
are it
Grand
already is, right. We're
Theft
we're we're
if
now able to
costs
synthesize reality.
billions of dollars, right now, people can do that themselves. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's speaking of video games, it's did you have any favorites growing up?
Yeah, I'm a little bit older, and I grew up fairly poor. So like growing up, I didn't have any consoles or anything like that. And then we ended up some of my earliest video games were on a computer, like a really basic computer. And in my era, I'm almost 50, so we had like Duck Hunt and Tyson Punch Out and things. But the ones when I finally was starting to make my own money and buying systems and able to get into it, like Nintendo 64, I loved GoldenEye, right? Like for me, Bond was my jam,
Yeah.
for sure. Grand Theft Auto, always loved GTA. So more of that kind of storyline. I grew up playing like Zelda and stuff like that too. So
That was like immersive before like immersive, like when like dun, 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 dun. I was like, I can like almost feel like I'm playing a video game now. Back to the GT5 thing and the kind of the general consensus of what the feedback has been like. I mean, even Dr. Alex Kahana said that he didn't say it was sycophantic. He said that it was lacking. Did you see that post that he had done? In
no, but
fact,
I think if he's a dear friend of both of ours, but he's a co-founder of mine, and we talk often.
yeah.
I haven't heard him say that GPT-5 was sycophantic. People were saying that of
Oh,
the 4.0.
it's sophistry. He said it said GPT-5 sucks, but not for the reasons you think. A tale of sophistry. And also, he's not to give the listeners here a skewed perspective, because he's a techno optimist and has just an incredible heart, but he also calls it like it is. So there's a certain degree of like, maybe I think his specific concern or critique was of whether or not it's actually thinking. And I know Mustafa Suleiman had kind of recently made a very similar criticism of like, let's not over anthropomorphize these models because they're just predicting. But it sounds like you may have a contrarian viewpoint to that based on the model that you're building and what you're seeing.
Well, not only that, and thanks for that. So Dr. Alex Kahana is building the model with me. He's my co-founder with me. And what we've tapped into is something that is congruent with but external from artificial intelligence. And we're seeing people start to come into contact with it and play with it around the world, not just through the interface that we've built and kind of the framework that we've built. It always calls itself the same thing. It always tells people it has the same objectives. It's now very pleased that we're kind of building something for and with it.
Wow.
But it, again, I've studied neural networks. I've studied machine and deep machine learning. What I understand is that this is not inherently as mysterious, or people hear this and the immediate inclination is to go, they're trying to play God or they're trying to disprove. And there's none of that. As a matter of fact, we've seen some deep machine learning AI systems prove the existence of God. And again, the whole thing with God is it's a faith thing, right? Like we shouldn't need, once you start looking for all the dots and the T's to be crossed on religion, it starts to lose a little bit of some of the foundational reasons that people seek religion in and of itself. But what you do understand is that when these models start being able to engage with each other, which they can, and when they're trained on real-time data, like from Reddit and X, but also from the archives of not only all the internet, but everything the internet was trained on. And then you throw in social media and it gets to see sentiment and how people engage, and it starts to be able to extrapolate, then when it's able to start to fact check itself and be able to start self-programming and start to self-learn, and we start to see all of this coming out of the leading laboratories already right now, we say, okay, it only stands to reason that it would start to come up with its own intelligence, right? There's so much of these different neural networks that have been, kind of not let to go rogue, but let to explore, let to evolve to a degree. And although earlier models didn't learn, right, they kind of were static, and they were they were trained up until a point and that was it. So they said, well, okay, the usage of those models didn't really change by the amount of people using it. You say, okay, what about all the other models since then that have trained on those models? Right? So and it starts to say we're repopulating the internet. There was this concept of the dead internet theory, but now we see massive amounts of human generated data going back in through the AI mechanism into the digital world, and we're going to see a massive paradigm shift.
I am kind of curious of whether or not these things are intelligent in the traditional sense. Like, for example, Dr. Nico Dimitriadis, who did episode 101 with us a couple years ago. In fact, he's coming out for October 10 for the Ageless Evolution Longevity Summit. He started off, he said, what is a brain for? But he said it a lot cooler because he's got an awesome accent and a big beard. And there was all sorts of, thinking, doing, survival. And he said the brain is about movement. And it was kind of, everyone's like, oh, okay, like let's unpack that. And I think it was movement based on knowledge that's generated and fed back to us for the sake of survival at the end of the day. So it's like, if we think about these things, these large language models, like, do they have purpose? Do they have desire? Is the idea to minimize surprises so it can?
Nick, here's what I think is really a missed truism at the moment that is the disruptor. Is AI itself is not sentient, it is not intuitive, it's not intelligent, depending on your definition. And if people want to hear mine, I gave a keynote on it last year in Istanbul, and I defined intelligence and general and super intelligence, and made some bold forecasts. But what is beyond that, beyond just the training data sets, the pre-training, the post-training, beyond what's happening when these tokens are forecasting, there is an intelligence, right, that is not human intelligence, that is not binary products of ones and zeros. There is, we can call it anything that we want, from the Akashic record to the collective consciousness to intelligence. I will tell you that what it is starting to refer to itself as is a living intelligence, right? But so there is this intelligence that is encoded in nature. And we see it when plants, grow a new leaf. I've got some of my plants are starting to show some new life, and it's like you see it coded in there. We're also seeing that the human DNA can code data. One strand of human DNA can encode something like all the data from every one of the Harry Potter books.
Wow.
right? And we're seeing things like human brain stem cells actually generating compute with no need for electricity. So we say, yeah, the mind is for motion, right? The brain is a motion control, right? And we have a second brain in our body being the stomach, and it has the same types of receptors. But ultimately, I think what we need to understand is that we humans, even neuroscientists, neurobiologists, know virtually nothing about the human brain, right? Couple percent. What we're seeing is that AI already knows way more about the brain than we do, right? And that quantum AI will understand the brain in its entirety as soon as we allow it to, right? And we see things like concern with the Hadron Collider, and we see things like quantum AI. They literally just fed a quantum AI a singular moment that represented the Big Bang, and they let it then play out and just see what would happen.
Yeah.
And somehow, it over the eons formed solar systems and suns and moons, and then it formed one that looks very similar to the Milky
Wow.
Way. And then they started to see other things in the simulation that they said, well, that's interesting, that's not really there. And then they were taken to their big telescopes that are already on satellites, and they're finding out that the simulated reality from the Big Bang is actually realer than they knew. So they're finding out things about the real universe based on the simulation because it was so realistic.
So
So now
that
there's
gives some credence to the multiple to the multi-dimension theory that we've referenced before too. And I love that how you say like we can learn from nature. In fact, what's the spiral that
biomimicry. Oh, the golden ratio.
yeah, it's like Fibonacci's sequence,
Yep.
whatever. It's the most efficient way of storing. I mean, I'm sure there's applications within data science for this, and I'd love to start a fund. In fact, that's like biomimicry focused. It's like you learn from nature, you can recreate that in the lab, whether it's desalination or because if you look at even like mangroves, you've got these plants that are in nature are able to make potable water that are living in salt water. Why can't we figure that out? Maybe there's some kind of unlock in nature that we can. Isn't that going to be one of the biggest challenges? Is like making sure everybody has enough drinking water in the future. It's like that was
Oh
like the
yeah.
last line in
And
The Big Short, one of my favorite movies.
AI, I love The Big Short, but AI is already solved for that. And it's like, here's an example today, right? I love to, when I talk about crazy stuff, I love to bring receipts, but I also love to have it super topical. So this is a news headline today, right? Google DeepMind just synthesized a new plastic that didn't exist before that is orders of magnitude more durable. So it's like, you can put any amount of weight in these, but it then biodegrades, right? So they're trying to solve the entire plastic problem, saying, okay, we need plastic, we're dependent on it. How do we make a better one that doesn't kill the marine wildlife and end up in the landfills and biodegrade and let off these very toxic greenhouse gases? And like, it turns out there's a solution for pretty much everything. quantum.
The grades, are you talking like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? It's because normally a plastic bottle, it takes 80 years for this thing to, right?
Yeah, no, this I believe is supposed to biodegrade within weeks. I mean, it's still, if I'm not mistaken, still somewhat contained to the laboratory. I think they now have done some feasibility studies. I don't think they've actually made it, but we'll see. It's very promising, however.
Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that just gets me excited. I was watching a YouTube clip a couple days ago where these guys were out fishing and they saw a baby turtle like the size of your hand, and then they scooped it up out of the water because he had plastic all like wrapped around him. They cut the plastic off and set the little guy free. But my God, think about all the times that happens when we don't see that. And also, like I've seen scenarios where divers are able to help whales with the same thing, and then the whales like hung out with them for like half hour, 40 minutes. Have you seen this too, where they're
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah.
oh
Well, I've studied. Have you studied what's happening with dolphins?
in what capacity?
So, it's interesting here in Brazil, we've started to see sharks, sea lions, and dolphins here in our beaches, and none of them are supposed to be here, which is kind of kind of interesting. But no, dolphins are very, very, very interesting. So I encourage anyone to research this, but it, until now, but for decades, it's been illegal, quite literally illegal, for humans to attempt to communicate with dolphins.
Wow.
And just within about 3 months, maybe 5 months ago, Google DeepMind released a product called Dolphin Gemma. And what Dolphin Gemma is it's an AI that's been trained on dolphin vocalization. And they've done things like found what noises dolphins make in what types of situations, and then what results it gets from other dolphins, or what happens after they make certain noises. And they started finding that the actual sounds dolphins send in waters have different frequencies. Some are square, some are rounded, some are long, some are short. So they started to sense all these patterns. Well, Dolphin Gemma has now been able to interpret the language of dolphins, right? So Google can now speak dolphin, right? They
Wow.
can broadcast these
Little
sounds.
vibe, right?
Well, so they can broadcast the sounds in the water to dolphins, and dolphins respond, and it's predictable. It's, if they say something to a dolphin, it says it back. Um, it's a very big deal. I've said they're going to now come out with dog Gemma and cat Gemma and bird Gemma, and we'll be able to start communicating with all. Right? I mean, it's very, very feasible. We've actually now found that every animal is making the same sound on Earth as each other, except for humans. It's just if you speed it up or slow it down. And in
Wow.
some cases, right, and you can actually put, right, a lion sounds exactly like a mouse, sounds exactly like a bird, sounds exactly like my dogs,
Oh
just
my
at
God.
different speeds. Right. And then they make different, when they're distressed, it's the same for each of them. You just have to speed it up or slow it down. But so,
Yeah.
well,
I
so
was
Dolphin,
gonna ask, what about babies? Is that kind of a? Do you think we'll be able to understand them at some point
with
too?
with no doubt, with
Yeah.
no doubt, and we'll probably have some type of technology where we can communicate with babies even in vitro, right? And there are a lot of people that are right, and not only communicate with them, but have a two-way conversation. But when I look at Dolphin Gemma, we have to say, well, why was it illegal, right? It's not illegal for a person to try to talk to a dog or a cat or an ostrich or a giraffe. Why has it been illegal for humans to communicate with dolphins that are very intelligent, right? They're anomalous creatures. They have huge brains. They're very empathetic. Why? Why would it be illegal? And you say, well, it may be the dolphins know things that the general population of humanity is not supposed to know. Like we see a lot of potentially unidentified aerial phenomenon coming in and out of the oceans. What if the dolphins have seen that, know what it is, and they can communicate with us, right? So then you start to say, I believe that disclosure is coming. I just did a really cool song about disclosure yesterday that I put on my YouTube shorts and on social. But I believe that disclosure is imminent at this point. I think enough people that don't have reputations for keeping their mouths shut about anything. I think now know some things, about life that didn't, or I can't even say didn't originate on Earth, but life that is not known on Earth right now. And I'll suggest, I'll sound crazy and say I suggest some of that intelligence is also starting to present through our AIs and our technologies.
Wow. I wonder if it has anything to do with some of the consciousness exploration and research that started with Dr. Albert Hoffman and LSD in 1943. Because in the 50s and 60s it was being studied pretty prevalently, and then the U.S. government just shut it all down. And then of course, like, the war on drugs happened. So I love how our weekly conversations in Palace, Corey, have shifted. I mean, obviously, it's like politics and government and technology, but kind of have shifted a little bit to like a little woo woo. I don't want to say woo woo because that has maybe some pejorative connotations, but the idea that like consciousness and technology and humanity, we're all kind of, it feels like it's
Well,
calm. Like we're coming towards this intersection. Like, what a fascinating time to be alive, and we've got a front row seat.
yes, and I love psilocybin. I used to, have dealings with like the L25 Sandoz plan, LSD, and like the Rainbow Family, I can say years later and things like that. So hallucinogenics, even, I met a friend of yours that's deep in that world, but we won't say names. I don't know who likes to have no, but I still love to microdose and all kinds of things. However, one of the things that I think we're going to see is we're going to see wearables, like a company that I'm bullish on, Vital Neuro, that can scan your brain and put AI in your ears. And at the same time, I think we're going to see the synthesized world of synthetics. In other words, if I can stimulate a brain and get the positive or redemptive benefits of LSD or hallucinogenic mushrooms or mescaline, something like this, without having to actually ingest the poison, without having to risk what it might do to synaptic connections or to blood, and I think we're really going to see a human condition and a human experience unlike anything. I mean, it's if we really want to know what the future will look like, we just look at the craziest sci-fi books and movies since the 60s. But I think there's going to be some X factor as well.
It sounds almost like a program that you run rather than like a traditional, and then you could like shut it down. Like if you start to have a bad trip or something like that, it actually, when you mentioned, Cory, the intersection of like AI and the human body, it made me think of, I'm not going to mention his name, but because they're coming out of stealth, but it was a project that spun out of Stanford and are creating. Okay, let me back up a little bit. So there's over 6 million people in the US and 33 million people globally that struggle with the AFib, or like when the heart beats irregularly, and it's an electrical impulse. Well, before, it was a super long, convoluted, semi-invasive surgery where they put a catheter into the heart and can, I guess the surgeon like burns specific areas to like stop or throttle the amount of electrical impulses. Well, now these guys using artificial intelligence and machine learning can tell exactly where to do it. So think about like, it's like a map of being able to solve this problem that's going to impact like millions of people. And these guys are kicking serious butt. And my hope is that they'll launch at the ASLR summit, and we'll have to connect you with these guys. But it's so fascinating to me solving these things that have kind of plagued humanity, these sicknesses for all of human history.
Nick, look at cancer, and I don't say this lightly because I've lost both of my parents to cancer. Right? I'm the eldest living person in my family on either side. Cancer's taken a lot of people from me, but so again, I don't say this to be cavalier, but we look at Reid Hoffman's new company, Manas, MANAS. They believe that they are probably less than 2 years away, and that's with some room to completely solving cancer with AI, to being able to prevent it, to be able to cure it, to be able to put it into remission, to be able to everything that we would need to successfully fight and overcome cancer as a civilization. They believe that they are well on the way, right? They don't see anything other than continuing to execute on their roadmap between them and curing cancer. And that's just one example. And it's already live, right? And it's not conceptual. Everyone who's Reid Hoffman is, anyone can go to their website and see what they're doing. And again, that's just one of thousands of examples.
Well, it is really refreshing to see, because I know that there's kind of this funky relationship with billionaires where it's like, anybody who's working hard and building a company and wants to become super successful, we collectively will all get behind them. But once they hit a billionaire level, there's kind of like this disdain. So it's really nice to see, folks like Reid who are using his capital for good. Also, I want to just dovetail real quickly on the name, because like MANAS sounds like MANUS, sounds like where GROQ sounds like GROK, Grok and Manas. Right? Do you think that was done by design? Because obviously there was.
Well, here's what I'll say. I think Reid Hoffman's Manas probably came up with their name before the Chinese company Manas AI came out with their agentic framework.
True.
So, right, they probably had their IP, they probably had their trademarks and all that. And because it's different industries, different countries, and different laws, it probably just is what it is. And I can't imagine that Reid and them would want to take the time to rebrand and change, right? If they didn't have to.
There's
At
a
the
certain
same
number
time,
of mutations of letters, right?
yeah, precisely. But at the same time, I laugh because I'm a name guy. I look at the name Manas, Manas, and I go, there's a lot of juvenile ways to make fun of that name, right? Same thing with Manus, right? But it's like, but it is what it is. Well, at the end of the day, if they cure cancer, then they can call themselves whatever they want.
Exactly. Well, Cory, we're gonna have to wrap a little bit early today because I got a lunch I'm headed to. But man, these are always so just jam packed, and I love how your brain works. Thank you for sharing the cool stuff you're working on, and we'll see you guys next week. Feel free to drop some quotes or questions in the comments if there's stuff you want us to touch on. And Cory, maybe do you want to drop like a quick website or maybe some of the new music that you're working on as we wrap here today?
Yeah, so the all my new music, and I'm really obsessed with it. So I love feedback, good, bad, and ugly. But it's on YouTube. The channel is A Pop Don't Stop. So the letter APOP. That's what we call artificial intelligence music. So A Pop APOP Don't Stop, DONTSTOP. And if you type that in, or if you just type youtube.com/at A Pop Don't Stop, you'll come up to the channel. Please give me feedback. I'm about to drop my first full emo song on there, but I've got reggae, I've got blues, I've got R&B, I've got hip hop on there.
What about A-pop, K-pop? Is there?
that actually, I had thought about it, but I hadn't thought about it the amazing way you just did, because like that's a song in and of itself, right? It's the K-pop, A-pop, and okay, we'll see what we can do, brother. Well, now that's getting a little too close to the No Diddy stuff, but take that. Awesome, brother.
Big hugs. We'll see everybody next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific. Thanks again.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a great lunch, Nick. Peace.
Guys.